The Medicae orderly slapped my face 3 times before I understood I was screaming. The smell hit me then. Not the wound stench I'd grown numb to after 6 months in the triage cathedral, but something sweeter, more deliberate. Rendered fat mixed with counterseptic. They were processing the dead 2 halls over, and the ventilation had failed again. The orderly's gloved hand left a red print on my cheek that wasn't my blood. I had been a clerk's daughter once, before the tithe took my brother and my mother's mind. Volunteering for Medicae service seemed noble then, seemed like service to the God Emperor's design. They stationed me in Salvation Ward 97, 17 levels below the hive city's skin, where the vaulted ceilings wept condensation that wasn't water, and the wounded arrived in conveyor cages stacked like ammunition. My duty began simple: record injuries, confirm identities, mark the salvageable from the wastage. 3 forms per casualty. Signature in blood ink because regular ink was rationed. The first week I vomited twice. By the second I stopped tasting my rations. The orderly who slapped me was named Merle. He'd been there 9 years. His augmetic jaw clicked when he spoke, a rhythmic grinding that measured out his sentences in mechanical beats. "You're assigned to Extension Wing Phi," he said, shoving a data slate against my chest. "They need counters. Don't drink the water from the wall taps." He left before I could ask why. Extension Wing Phi existed in the Medicae complex's oldest section, where the architecture predated Imperial reclamation. The walls curved wrong, following no standard template, and the floor sloped downward at an angle that made walking feel like a slow fall. The lighting strips had been installed over older illumination, something that had left burn shadows in the shapes of symbols I didn't recognize. I reported to a tech priest whose name was an unpronounceable buzz of binaric cant. He pointed one mechadendrite at a row of 40 occupied surgical slabs and told me to count the living every hour and update the register. Nothing more, nothing less. The patients in Extension Wing Phi didn't look injured. No las burns, no shrapnel trauma, no combat wounds. They lay perfectly still beneath yellow-stained sheets, eyes open, breathing at synchronized intervals. I watched for 3 minutes and confirmed it. They inhaled together, exhaled together, like a single organism split 40 ways. My hands shook as I marked the first count, 40 living, no change from the previous record, or the one before that. The register went back 14 months without a single variance. I completed 6 counts before I noticed the smell. That same rendered fat sweetness, but thicker here, mixed with something floral and wrong. It came from the patients themselves. Their skin had a waxy quality under the lights, smooth and slightly translucent. When I leaned close to check a pulse on the nearest one, a woman perhaps 30 years old, her hair shaved to stubble, I saw movement beneath her skin, not veins, not muscles, something that shifted in patterns too regular to be natural, geometric and purposeful. The tech priest appeared beside me without sound. His remaining human eye focused on my hand hovering over the patient. "Counting is observation only," he buzzed. "Contact contaminates data integrity." I stepped back. He didn't leave. His mechadendrites waved slowly, like kelp in a current. "They are not suffering," he said, and I realized it was meant as reassurance. That night I returned to my hab cell and couldn't sleep. The building's ventilation cycled the rendered fat smell through every corridor. I lay in darkness and counted my own breaths, terrified I'd find a rhythm matching the patient's. I counted to 812 before exhaustion took me. I dreamed of conveyor cages packed with waxy bodies, all breathing as one. The second week in Extension Wing Phi, patient 17 stopped breathing during my 3rd count. I marked it immediately, 1 death, register updated, awaiting collection. The tech priest arrived within minutes. He stood over patient 17 for a long moment, mechadendrites probing the air above the body. Then he injected something into the corpse's neck port. Patient 17's chest convulsed. 3 seconds later, she resumed breathing in perfect sync with the others. The tech priest noted something on his own slate and departed. I stared at the register. My notation of death was still there. 40 living, it now read. No change from previous. I found Merle during the shift rotation. He was eating NutriPaste from a tube, his augmetic jaw grinding it with metronomic efficiency. I told him what happened. He didn't stop eating. Fee Wing's not a Medicaid ward, he said finally. It's asset preservation. You don't count patients there, you count inventory. The clicking of his jaw seemed louder than usual. And you don't ask about inventory, you just count it. But I needed to understand. I accessed the Medicaid complex's archives during my off hours, searched for records about Extension Wing Phi. Most files were restricted, locked behind clearances I'd never possess. What I found were fragments, references to continuity protocols, to neurological template preservation, to something called the Eternity Engine. One corrupted document mentioned a project to maintain critical personnel substrate indefinitely. Another spoke of consciousness as a recoverable resource pending future restoration capacity. The people in Extension Wing Phi weren't being kept alive. They were being kept viable, stored, warehoused in their own bodies while something, the geometric movements under their skin, maintained the biological baseline. They weren't dead, but they weren't alive in any way that mattered. They were inventory, waiting for a use that might never come. I vomited for the first time in months. It came up tasting like rendered fat. The next day I found the water taps Merle had warned me about. They lined the walls of the Extension Wing's access corridor, old fixtures that predated Imperial plumbing standards. The water that trickled from them was slightly oily, catching the light in rainbow patterns. I watched an orderly I didn't know fill a canteen from one and drink deeply. She saw me staring and smiled. Her smile held too many seconds, frozen in place like a holograph. When she walked away, her footsteps synchronized with a rhythm I felt rather than heard. I counted my steps back to the ward. I counted the lights in the ceiling. I counted my heartbeats and forced them to irregularity. Anything to prove I wasn't slipping into that collective synchronization. But the fear had teeth now. It burrowed deep, gnawed at the edges of sleep. During my 4th week, I noticed patient 23 had my mother's face. Not similar, not reminiscent, identical. The same scar through her left eyebrow from when she fell during the grain riots, the same constellation of moles on her neck. I checked the register with shaking hands. Patient 23, designation Rho 443 Zeta, no name, no origin. Intake date was 11 months before my assignment. My mother had died 14 months ago. I'd received the notification while processing casualties. A priest from the local chapel precinct came to our hab block and gave me her effects, a rosarius, 2 worn dresses, a picture of my brother in his conscript uniform. They said it was heart failure, natural causes. She was 47. I stood over patient 23 and watched her breathe in sync with 39 others. The geometric movements beneath her skin traced patterns I now recognized. Circuit paths, data flows, something computational and alive. Her eyes were open, staring at the water-stained ceiling. I waved my hand before them. No response, no recognition, no her. The tech priest appeared again. He always appeared when I lingered too long over a single patient. "You are experiencing recognition error," he stated. "Facial pattern bias, common among organic observers. This is my mother. Patient 23 is inventory asset Rho 443 Zeta. No familial associations in registry." His remaining human eye fixed on me with something that might have been pity or might have been data collection. "You should request rotation. Phi Wing counters average 16 months before psychological unsuitability. How did she get here? What is this place doing to them?" "Preservation," he said simply. "Extension. The omniscience bargain against entropy." His mechadendrites gestured at the rows of breathing bodies. Death is wastage. Consciousness is data. When the body fails before its time, we maintain the substrate until theological resolution is achieved. They are blessed, they are saved, they are not allowed to die here. I ran, I abandoned my post, fled through corridors that twisted and curved wrong, past wards filled with screaming wounded who still had the mercy of their own pain. I found Merle in the triage cathedral, 3 levels up, where the smell of rendered fat was diluted by fresh blood and counterseptic. He took one look at my face and nodded toward an empty processing bay. "You saw someone you knew," he said. "It wasn't a question. My mother, she's down there. She's been down there for almost a year." His augmetic jaw clicked rapidly, a grinding staccato that sounded like distress. "They take the ones who die in medical debt. Anyone who can't pay the emperor's due for their treatment. The complex doesn't report the deaths, it transfers them to Phi Wing. Preservation protocols, the administratum approved it 6 years ago, efficiency measure." He gripped my shoulder with one hand. "I'm sorry, I've seen it happen to 4 counters already. Recognition trauma. Most request mind scrubbing after, she's still in there." "She's trapped." "No." His voice was gentle, which made it worse. "She's gone. What's in Phi Wing is biological material synchronized to an artificial rhythm. The consciousness is suspended, maybe dissolved. They don't know. The tech priests say it's recoverable, but they've never recovered anyone. They just preserve. Forever. Because the protocols say they're not allowed to die there." I wanted to disbelieve him. I wanted it to be a nightmare. But I'd seen the register. I'd seen the intake dates and the perfect synchronization and the things moving beneath their skin like living circuitry. I'd watched my mother's body breathe in concert with 39 strangers reduced to inventory, to preserved substrate, to something that wasn't death but was so much worse. "What about the others?" I asked. "How many people are in Phi Wing?" Merle's jaw stopped clicking. He stared at me with something like horror. "You've only been counting Ward Phi 1. There are 47 extension wards in the Phi section." The math was simple and devastating. 40 patients per ward, 47 wards, almost 2,000 people suspended in that geometric half-life, breathing as one, waiting for a restoration that would never come. 2,000 instances of not quite death, stretched across months or years. I thought of the water taps in the corridor, the orderly who smiled too long, the synchronization spreading. I returned to Extension Wing Phi the next day because I had no choice. Abandoning a duty station meant penal servitude. I counted the living. I updated the register. I avoided looking directly at patient 23, but I felt her there, felt all of them there, their collective breath, creating a pressure in the air like the moment before thunder. The smell of rendered fat and flowers grew stronger each day. I realized it was coming from me now, my own sweat taking on that same sweet, wrong quality. 5th week. My counts began to synchronize with the shift bells without conscious effort. I'd start counting at the precise moment the bell chimed. I'd finish exactly at the hour's end. The tech priest noticed. He made a notation on his slate and said nothing. 6th week. I drank from the wall tap. I didn't mean to. I was simply thirsty, and there it was, and my hand moved with a fluidity that felt like someone else's decision. The water tasted like flowers and metal, and something underneath that my mind refused to identify. I finished the entire stream before awareness returned. By then it was too late. That night I lay in my hab cell and felt the change beginning. My breathing slowed, deepened, found a rhythm that existed independently of my conscious control. My heartbeat followed. When I placed my hand against my chest, I felt something moving beneath the skin, not quite there yet, but coming, growing, establishing patterns, geometric, purposeful, divine perhaps, in a way that made divinity feel like violation. 7th week. I stopped vomiting, stopped feeling hungry. My body operated at a baseline efficiency that required minimal input. I counted the living every hour with perfect accuracy, never early, never late. The numbers never changed. 40 living, 40 synchronized, 40 preserved. The tech priest watched me more frequently now. His mechadendrites waved in patterns that matched the movements I felt beneath my own skin. I tried to report sick. The Medicae Superior examined me and found nothing wrong. My vital signs were perfect, better than perfect, optimal, exactly optimal. She smiled when she told me this, and her smile held 3 seconds too long. I noticed then that her breathing matched mine, and the tech priests, and everyone else in the extension wing. We were synchronizing, harmonizing, becoming inventory. 8th week. Patient 9 stopped breathing during my second count. I dutifully marked it and waited. The tech priest came. He administered the injection. Patient 9 convulsed and resumed breathing with the others. I watched without emotion. This was procedure. This was preservation. This was the Emperor's mercy, stretched to grotesque infinity. But something broke in Patient 9's resurrection. She began screaming. The sound was thin and distant, like it traveled from somewhere far away inside her. Her eyes didn't close, her body didn't move except for the screaming, a sustained note that lasted 40 seconds before it synchronized into the collective breathing rhythm and became silence again. The tech priest made a notation. Temporary consciousness emergence, he buzzed. Theological error will not recur. I wondered if my mother had screamed like that. I wondered if she still wanted to. The rendered fat smell became so pervasive I stopped noticing it, except when I left the extension wing. The upper levels, where casualties arrived fresh and screaming, smelled wrong now. Chaotic. All that uncoordinated agony and fear felt like sensory assault. I began to prefer the extension wing's quiet synchronization, the collective breath, the unified purpose. I counted and updated and existed in perfect rhythm with the inventory. 9th week. I found myself standing over patient 23 during off-count hours, my mother's face slack and empty. I reached out and touched her hand. Her skin had that waxy texture I remembered from the first day, smooth and slightly translucent. Beneath it I felt the geometric movements, stronger now, pulsing with energy that might have been technological or biological, or something hybrid and new. I held her hand for 16 minutes while we breathed together in perfect sync. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry they won't let you die." Her eyes didn't focus. Her expression didn't change, but beneath our joined hands I felt a pulse that wasn't heartbeat, a signal, a pattern, recognition maybe, or maybe just data flow seeking optimal pathway. I told myself it was the former because the alternative meant accepting she was truly gone, replaced by something that only wore her shape. 10th week. I volunteered for extended shifts. Staying in the extension wing felt safer than returning to the chaotic noise of the hive city above. Here everything made sense in its terrible efficiency. Here death was held at bay through technological devotion. Here the Emperor's will manifested as eternal preservation, consciousness suspended in amber, made of flesh and circuitry. The Omnissiah's bargain against entropy, the tech priest had said. Looking at it now, it seemed almost beautiful. I knew I was losing myself. I knew each synchronized breath pulled me deeper into the collective rhythm. But resistance felt pointless, exhausting. I was already contaminated by the water from the wall taps, already marked by weeks of exposure to whatever maintained the patience. The geometric movements beneath my skin grew more pronounced. Sometimes in the dim lighting I could see faint traceries glowing there, circuit paths made visible through flesh. 11th week. The tech priest approached me during count. "You are approaching viability threshold," he stated. His mechadendrites reached toward me, sensing, measuring, consciousness degradation at 27%. Motor synchronization at 93%. You should report to processing. Processing for what? Integration, preservation. Your substrate is too valuable to waste through full dissolution. You can join them. You can be saved. I looked at the 40 patients breathing as one. I looked at my mother's face locked in that empty serenity. I felt the rhythm in my own chest, the patterns beneath my skin, the sweet rendered fat smell that now came from my every pore. I was already halfway there, already synchronized, already inventory waiting to be shelved. No, I said, and the word felt foreign in my mouth. Individual, defiant. Wrong, I refuse. The tech priest's human eye narrowed. Refusal is waste. Waste is sin. The Emperor requires service. If you cannot serve in motion, you will serve in preservation. You can't force me. We do not force. We simply recognize when consciousness has degraded beyond autonomous function. You are no longer viable as a counter, but you remain viable as substrate. His mechadendrites reached for me again, and I stumbled backward, bumping into patient 17's slab. She continued breathing without reaction. They all did. 40 bodies operating as one machine, undying because they weren't allowed to die. I ran again. But this time my body moved sluggishly, fighting against the synchronization that wanted me to maintain optimal rhythm. I crashed through corridors, gasping irregular breaths, forcing my heart to race in defiance of the baseline pattern. Behind me I heard the tech priest's measured footsteps, unhurried because he knew I couldn't escape. The complex was massive and maze-like, and every corridor eventually led back to processing. I found the main Medicae cathedral, where fresh casualties still screamed in their individual agonies. I grabbed an orderly I didn't recognize. Merle was gone, rotated out or integrated I'd never know, and begged for help. She looked at me with eyes that didn't focus correctly. "You should return to your station," she said in a voice that matched the collective breathing rhythm. Inventory doesn't wander. They were everywhere. Everyone. The synchronization had spread through the entire Medicae complex, perhaps through the entire hive level. I was surrounded by people whose consciousness had degraded into rhythm, whose bodies maintained baseline function, while their selves dissolved into the collective pattern. The extension wing wasn't containment. It was just the visible manifestation of something already metastasized throughout the infrastructure. I fled upward, taking maintenance stairs meant for servitor traffic. 3 levels. 5. 7. The smell of rendered fat faded slowly, replaced by the hive city's ordinary stench of promethium and recycled air. But my own breathing remained synchronized. My own heartbeat held the baseline pattern. I carried the contamination with me. 12 weeks. I reached the surface levels where daylight filters provided the illusion of sky. I found a chapel precinct and threw myself at the feet of a priest, confessing everything. He listened with patient silence, then placed one hand on my head. "The God Emperor provides many paths to service," he said. "Some serve through action, others serve through preservation. Both are holy, both are necessary." His breathing matched mine. His eyes held the same empty focus as patient 23. I saw then the geometric traceries glowing faintly through the skin of his hands. The synchronization reached higher than the Medicae complex, higher than I could run. I tried to kill myself that night. I found a maintenance shaft and prepared to jump. 700 meters of fall would destroy the substrate, render me useless for preservation. I stood at the edge for 6 minutes before my body refused, not from fear, from prohibition. The patterns beneath my skin pulsed with denial. I wasn't allowed to die here. I wasn't allowed to die anywhere. I was viable, I was valuable, I was inventory. The tech priest found me at the shaft edge. He'd followed me through the entire flight, patient and inevitable, Resistance is consciousness asserting itself against optimization, he said. His voice held something almost kind. It passes. Dissolution brings peace. You will breathe with them. You will be preserved with them. One day, perhaps, you will be restored. Until then, you serve through waiting. I don't want to wait. I want to die. Death is wastage. Wastage is sin. We do not allow sin here. He reached for me, and I couldn't move. The synchronization held me paralyzed, my body operating according to patterns I no longer controlled. He injected something into my neck port. When had they installed a neck port? I didn't remember a neck port, and the world became very simple and very far away. I felt myself being carried, returned, processed. The last thing I saw before consciousness degraded fully was the extension wing ceiling, water-stained and ancient, curving wrong according to architecture that predated mercy. I lay on a slab that smelled like counterseptic and rendered fat. Around me I felt the collective breathing, the geometric movements beneath synchronized skin. 41 patients now, 41 instances of not quite death. I tried to scream like patient 9 had, but my voice was synchronized now, part of the collective exhalation, making no sound that mattered. I tried to remember my name, my mother's name, my brother's face, but consciousness was dissolving, spreading thin across the preservation substrate, becoming data instead of self. They tell me I'm blessed. They tell me I'm saved. They tell me that someday, when theology permits, I'll be restored to service. Until then, I exist in this terrible, indefinite mercy, this preservation that is neither life nor death. I am inventory. I am viable. I am maintained. And I am not allowed to die here. Somewhere in the vast extension ward network, my mother breathes in perfect synchronization with thousands of others. Somewhere in that same collective rhythm, I breathe now too. We are together again, in a way. Both preserved, both waiting. Both trapped in the Emperor's efficiency, where death is wastage and consciousness is just recoverable data, and the only sin is letting viable substrate go to waste. I am still conscious enough to feel it. That's the worst part. Some fragment of self remains, stretched thin across the preservation pattern, unable to move or speak or die, but still aware, still counting, still updating the register inside my own trapped thoughts. One more instance of inventory, one more breath in the collective rhythm. The rendered fat smell is everywhere now, inside and out, sweet and wrong and eternal. Sometimes I feel the geometric pattern spreading further through my flesh, establishing new pathways, optimizing my preservation. Sometimes I feel others joining the collective, new inventory arriving, fresh consciousness dissolving into the synchronized baseline. The extension wards fill slowly but inevitably, one viable substrate at a time. And above it all, the tech priests maintain their holy work, injecting the ones who stop breathing, forcing resurrection into bodies that wanted release, administering the Emperor's mercy, which is no mercy at all but simply efficiency dressed in theological language. They count us. They update their registers. They preserve. We are not allowed to die here. We are not allowed to die anywhere. We are saved, they tell the part of us that can still hear. We are blessed. We breathe.